Republicans and conservative groups may have settled on a message heading into the midterm elections. Inflation hurts. The Coalition to Protect American Workers released a 30-second ad last week targeting the president's agenda. The group is led by Mark Short. You'll remember he was the chief of staff for former Vice President Mike Pence. The ad is running in the congressional districts of 5 House Democrats. Those lawmakers originally didn't fully back the infrastructure bill, but eventually voted in favor.
Biden just doesn't get it. He doesn't understand just how bad inflation's hurting Americans. Gas, groceries, housing, all skyrocketing. Yet, Biden's still pushing his massive spending plan that will cost trillions more than Biden claimed.
Joining me now to break this down is Brett Samuels. He's a White House reporter for The Hill. Brett, let's start with that ad. Is it an indication of Republicans' main strategy heading into the midterms, targeting voters' fears about inflation?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me this afternoon. It's definitely a sign that inflation is an issue that Republicans feel is an effective topic that they can attack Democrats on. It's one that they feel resonates with a large swath of the public at this point. We've heard sort of over and over again, sort of, about the rising prices of gasoline, of milk, of bread, of sort of these basic goods that people are going out and buying. And we're seeing more and more Republicans sort of latch onto this, both to attack Democrats and argue that the Biden agenda is not working, and to sort of, push some of these moderate Democrats and maybe make them think twice about whether they want to back this larger social spending plan that the White House is hoping to get passed through Congress in the coming weeks.
A series of recent polls show President Biden's job approval rating has been dropping as inflation rises. Have Democrats really ignored concerns about inflation by focusing so much on the president's spending plans?
Yeah, it's something that I think some would argue that they should have maybe taken more seriously sooner. I think we've certainly seen, especially in the last couple of weeks, President Biden himself has made a point to sort of address head on that he's aware and acknowledge that there's these concerns about inflation and rising prices. We've seen other White House officials make a point to say, that they're working on this. This is a topic they know matters to the American public. But certainly, earlier this year, over the summer, as the White House was sort of making the case for their agenda, we heard a lot of talk that, inflation is transitory. It's not going to be a long-term issue. It's just sort of, happening now as the recovery gets going from the pandemic. So certainly, I think we've seen a shift in tone from the White House just in the last couple of weeks to try and make the point that they're aware that this is a big concern for voters, and they're aware that this is something they need to get under control to sort of, regain the public's trust and get their approval ratings back on track.
So given that, Brett, what are Democrats doing to respond to ads like that?
Yeah, so, we saw President Biden talk about, playing up this more targeted infrastructure bill that was passed just a couple of weeks ago that the president will sign into law on Monday. Talk about how funds for that can be used to, ease congestion at ports, to free up supply chains, which then they argue will have this sort of trickle-down effect of easing inflation once that gets under control. I think we'll see Democrats sort of tout that infrastructure bill in their home districts, talk about sort of, the jobs that will be created by that, the shovel-ready projects that will get funded by that bill. But certainly it'll be interesting to see, whether all Democrats get behind this larger spending bill to say, this is something that will help boost the economy in the meantime and help get us off the ground further with this recovery and get things really moving, or if there's going to be a sort of split between those who argue, that this bigger spending plan is needed, and those who argue, inflation's too big of a concern right now and we can't afford to sort of push through with a nearly $2 trillion spending bill at this point.
Most economists agree that no matter who's in office, presidents have limited influence on the economy. How much do voters hold the administration responsible? And how much does those arguments that the Republicans are putting out there have merit?
Yeah, it's a great point. And the White House has talked about this to an extent that, the president can't wave a magic wand and and ease inflation or lower prices, especially on something like gasoline. He has limited tools in this case to sort of get gas prices down now, for example. But certainly we've seen from polling that that voters, they care about what's happening with their pocketbooks, what's happening with their checking accounts and saving accounts. Regardless of that, we've seen consistently in polls that the president fares okay with his approval rating on how he's handling the pandemic, for example. But when it comes to the economy, he's more underwater. For example, the Washington Post poll that came out Sunday morning showed him, at least 15 points underwater as far as how voters rate him on handling the economy. So, while it's true that there's only so much the president can do on his own to get the economy moving, to get inflation under control, that argument doesn't necessarily resonate with voters who just want to see results at this point.
Yeah, Brett, you mentioned the price of gasoline. We heard Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, the Democrat, say that he felt he was calling on the president today to bring down gas prices by releasing the strategic petroleum reserves. Is that likely going to be something that the Biden administration acts on?
Yeah, it's something that has been floated before the administration. This administration is always very, very fond of saying that all options are on the table, but they aren't going to commit one way or another. I think certainly as we head into the winter, if this is sort of a lingering issue that's really affecting the public, especially if it has an effect on demand or supply, I should say, it's possible that we'll see the administration dip into the strategic reserve. But I also think they're sort of wary of doing anything that will, lead people to panic or lead people to think that there's a reason to panic about, gasoline, gas prices, gas availability. So I think they're going to proceed with caution, but certainly, they're certainly monitoring this issue at the White House, this issue of gas prices and rising prices more generally.
Very quickly, Brett, is inflation the issue most likely to resonate with independent voters and cause Democrats to lose their razor-thin majorities in the House and the Senate?
Yeah, I think it's certainly up there among the top issues. I think we've seen in New Jersey and Virginia and the recent governor races, the economy and inflation in particular is a topic that really resonates and that could sort of steer some independents away from Democrats, especially in those swing seats that are being targeted by these ads. I think issues like education, for example, was a big one in Virginia. Those are the kind of local issues and the ones that are just sort of affecting day-to-day life, I think, for the public that are going to really swing things one way or another in the midterms, especially in those key districts that were tight in 2020, tight in 2018, and I would expect them to be tight again in 2022.
All right, Brett Samuels, thank you.
Thanks for having me.